Hey everyone, welcome to the Retail Redefined podcast, a podcast that is all about retail, design, and the future of it. And I'm your host, Chriselle. On today's episode, we are having Katy Wise and Itzel Meynard on the show, two of our designers in our interiors team. And today we are talking about the differences and similarities between interior design and architecture, or as we call it, interior architecture. There are a lot of misconceptions that people tend to have when they think of interior design and interior designers. And today we have Itzel and Katy to dispel some of those myths. And since they are also both women, we also naturally flowed into a conversation a little bit talking about their experience as not only being architects or interior designers, but also being women in the architecture and engineering and construction industry. So we hear a little bit of some of the things that they've encountered among their colleagues as well. It was a really informative conversation, and I actually learned a lot as someone who is kind of, still learning and navigating my way through this industry. It is very helpful to know. And it's also good to keep in mind because these disciplines are so intertwined and both just as important as the other. So I hope you enjoy today's episode. Stay tuned. Hey guys, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for being on the show today. I know it's been a little difficult trying to get schedules to line up, but we're doing this.
Yes.
We're doing this.
We're finally doing it.
So let's get right into it. I don't know which one of you wants to start first, but why don't you guys start talking a little bit about your guys' backgrounds and how you got into both interior design and architecture?
Yeah, sure. I'll start first. My name is Katy Wise. I'm a senior designer in the interior design department, and I'm also a licensed architect. And I started that journey actually as an interior design student at the University of Texas. I wanted to do interior design forever. I was grew up watching HGTV, and that's not necessarily a super great depiction of interior design, but it was the first thing that introduced me to this notion that you could, shape the spaces around you. And so I began as an interior design student at the University of Texas, and I actually had no previous exposure to architecture whatsoever. But I took an elective called Architecture and Society, which was taught by the great Larry Speck, and it kind of opened my eyes to the possibilities of architecture. And, I didn't think I previously understood why interior design was located within the School of Architecture, but once I started to kind of make that connection between, the two of curating experiences through the shaping of space, then I decided to switch my major to do architecture because it's sort of understood in the industry for some reason that if you are an architect, you can practice interior design. Mm-hmm. But if you are an interior designer, you cannot necessarily practice architecture.
Yeah.
But my end goal was to be able to do both.
That's really awesome. Okay, what about you, Itzel?
So my name's Itzel Meynard. I'm from Northern California, representing NorCal. My experience with interior design and how I came to this path was from kind of my upbringing. Grew up Central Valley in Northern California in an apartment complex with limited space. So right off the bat, the need for wanting to create spaces because I lacked it, didn't have any privacy at all whatsoever up until, I think, even up until my adulthood because, you go off to college and you share bedrooms and all that. So the need for wanting to create a space of my own to problem solve and kind of led me to this path of interior design and architecture. And I was always very intrigued by construction and architecture, that it was just kind of a natural path. And being an impatient kid growing up, I did not want to take on additional classes because I had another misconception of architecture that it's all math. It felt like I had to go be a mathematician, and I did not want that. Yeah. I just wanted to do design and, stick to just form and function. So naturally I was like, okay, I'm going to do interior design because, it's a lot less technical. After being in school, I went to the Fashion Institute of Design in San Francisco and then California State University, Sacramento. I realized that I still had this need for the architecture, the exterior envelope, and naturally that was my next step into my career. After graduating, I pursued architecture right off the bat, got an internship, and then started working for a small little boutique architecture firm. And that's where I've been ever since, up until recently now, being in the interior studio, where we're kind of evolving and merging the two different typologies into one.
Yeah. It was a lot of math now that you mention it.
Yeah.
I don't know why, though. I just barely skated through that.
See, and I had gotten this from other people, and I'm like, I don't want to do physics. I don't want to do calculus. I just want to design.
Totally.
But.
Okay. And you both ended up here in sunny Southern California.
Yeah, and we're both pretty much practicing interior architecture, I would say.
I landed here not by choice. Because
Really?
I was still am very proud Northern Californian. But unfortunately for me, when I began my career, it was during the recession. Right, a year right after is when everyone was laid off. So there was no work for me in the area that I wanted to be in. So that kind of drove me to look elsewhere. And Southern California was the bulk of the jobs that were still available. So that's how I came to be here.
Oh, okay. And
I
came here by choice.
I came here by choice. My personal life led me here, and I've always been kind of a drifter. I moved out to New York City after graduation, then moved back to Austin, and then I've been here for just over 3 years.
Okay. Well, that's awesome that you guys are both here now.
I will add, though,
Yeah.
I am so happy to be here.
Not by choice.
That was my choice.
In Southern California?
Southern California specifically.
She's actually shackled to her desk. We won't let her leave.
More so Long Beach than anything.
Okay.
Like, Long Beach is home now.
Yeah. I mean, it's come a long way in the last few years. So I'm glad that you actually enjoy being here now. Okay, so now that we kind of got that out of the way, so people kind of have a little bit of context of who you guys are, why don't we talk about interior design versus interior architecture? So obviously we're going to be debunking a lot of misconceptions of what it is. You guys are both practicing interior architecture, but you guys are also part of the interior design studio, and and I know that you both have slightly different perspectives on how they're defined. So
So for me, it's kind of funny that both Katy and I are in the same field now, in the same studio, but our background academically and by practice are completely opposite in a way.
Yeah, we kind of came from different ends of the spectrum.
So academically, I'm interior design,
Yeah.
and even my certification is interior design, but by practice, it's always been architecture. So even my own personal misconceptions of interior design profession have led me to pursue the architecture path. So
yeah, mine was a little more mixed. I had a minor in interior design. I was kind of like always balancing these two from the beginning. And my first job out of college was at a strictly interior design firm. Then I went to an architecture firm, and then came here and practiced architecture here, strictly architecture, for 2 years or so. And then when it was announced that we were going to start an interior design department, I was like, raised my hand. I was like, sign me up. I want in.
yeah, because it always felt like, okay, architecture firms, they deal with the exterior, the envelope of the building. And then if you want to deal with the interior portion, then you have to do interior design.
Yeah.
Like they're two separate professions. And that's how it has always been. And it wasn't until I started doing institutional work where I realized, this is actually all overlapping. It's all connected together. One should not be without the other.
I think it depends on the scale. Like in practice, it depends on the scale of the project and the typology. I think institutional, like interior architecture, is a lot more prominent. Workplace, which she and I are both doing a lot of right now, Certain commercial projects, it's more normal to have an interior architect or an architect who is architect of record for the interior. Other projects, smaller scale, or multifamily, a lot of times they'll have interior designer as a consultant, which I've worked a little bit as, and that's pretty fun. But I think that what I'm ultimately going for at least, is to be versatile in both.
Yes.
I always like to tell people that I like to live kind of in that gray area in between. There's like this sweet spot where these two practices overlap, and I think that in practice it really translates to, we get a project. Are we doing the full permit set? Are we architect of record? Then that means we own the walls. We own coordination with all the consultants, or is our purpose there just to kind of take the bones that the architect has given us and really turn it into an experience? That's when we would be, just architect or interior designer as a consultant. And then when we do interior architecture, we're really taking on both.
Okay.
Yeah, so this kind of leads into what we're talking about today. Our topic is the misconception of interior design. Now it's being referred to, or it's created this new kind of term, interior architecture, when in reality, interior architecture comes because interior design has always been misunderstood. Like, what is interior design? Because of the word design, I feel people, or in the profession, it was not respected and thought of as technical. So then people started saying interior architecture because you're well more respected. You actually have the architecture title to kind of...
I have a story about that, actually.
to kind of prove that you're qualified. You're not just a decorator.
Yeah.
You're not just picking finishes and fabrics. You actually know what you're doing. You're creating a space and experience.
Yeah. So I was walking a couple months ago. I was walking with a colleague in the industry. This was after a project lunch for which we are the interior architects, but we're often referred to as the interiors team. And we were walking by a storefront, and I noticed an exterior building material had been installed, and I said, "Oh, look, the Corten steel is up." And he turned to me and he said, "Well, you're interiors, you're not supposed to know what that is." And I just, that gave me pause, because, the interior designers I've worked with, first of all, are some of the most knowledgeable in materials or materiality and building materials, a lot more knowledgeable than me in some cases. So I thought for that person to, assume that I wouldn't know that because he thought I was an interior designer, I thought that was strange. I kindly informed him that I am a licensed architect, and he's been quite respectful to me since. But I shouldn't have had to tell him that, or to even be licensed as an architect to garner respect. I thought that was a little wild. Yeah, and it kind of goes into the whole women in the industry, but that's a whole separate topic that we can go into later on. This was also we had just come from a lunch where I was the only woman at a table of 9 or 10 men, which is not atypical. That's not unusual in this industry. I'm pretty used to it. Yeah, I think for me, I'm so accustomed to it that it's not something I notice anymore. But when something like that happens, when you start to understand that they perceive you differently, you always wonder how your gender plays into that. Well, I am the only woman in this project, so I wonder if he just kind of made an assumption. But that's
if that played into it. If it was a man who was an interior designer, if he would have said the same thing.
Totally. I mean, we'll never know, obviously. We'll never know. But when you're a minority in any situation like that, that thought always crosses your mind.
Of course.
Yeah. Luckily, I had the experience really early on in my career. My first official job here in Southern California, I was thrown into the construction administration portion of a project. So immediately, my superior at the time, he was in the profession at the time for 30 plus years. So he knew how women were treated on the job site. So right off the bat, as soon as I jumped on board, he directed the entire construction team and the contractor and let them know Itzel would be the one in charge here. She's going to be the one providing direction. And with that, set the tone for respect and making sure that people were actually listening to me and I had a voice and I was being respected. And ever since then, I think that kind of gave me the confidence to be assertive in situations that, require you to do so.
That's great.
So you're not just seen as the little, architect on the job site who doesn't know anything.
Girl that's or the little interior designer who they assume doesn't know anything, which is so far off base.
Yeah. I think it's good that you talk about that because don't want to get too off topic, but I think that just goes to show empowering, people in, especially if you are a minority of whatever kind in these kinds of spaces, how that is powerful and it helps you. It doesn't hurt everybody else. It only helps you and everybody around you.
Correct.
So that's great.
Yeah, and it's something that we can now take on and teach, the younger staff.
Yeah.
To feel empowered and confident.
It's really important to set the tone. That's awesome that you had that to kind of set the tone from the beginning of your career, to know that you can walk onto a job site and the architect is in charge when you're on a job site, essentially. Technically the contractor is in charge, but you kind of automatically are able to garner that respect. But if you're a woman, and if, say, you're not a licensed architect, sometimes that is a little bit harder to attain.
Yeah. And even though you walk into a job site and it's known that you're the one that's the architect of record, there's still tendencies for, everyone else in the construction team to kind of try to get direction from elsewhere, from your superiors. But then you kind of have to drive the conversation back and let them know, hey, no, I'm the one in charge. You have to come through me. You funnel the information through me.
Had to do that quite a few times.
Yeah, it keeps reoccurring, but that's just the nature of our profession.
Yeah. Something that I also noticed, besides, the fact that you guys both happen to be women in the profession, the connotation of the words make a big difference. Interior design versus interior architecture, and why, how you guys have said we're now shifting to use the phrase interior architecture to kind of show that it's more comprehensive and that interior design is not just picking fabrics and swatches.
Yeah, it's something I asked Itzel just earlier. I asked her if she considers herself an interior architect, because that's how I usually introduce myself, and she brought up the point that she's not legally, anyone who's not licensed is not legally allowed to use the term architect because it's a protected title. And in many states the term interior designer is not, which is bonkers, because anyone can call themselves an interior designer when it actually is a very highly specialized profession. And it's different than interior decorating. Interior designer is actually a protected title in Texas. I was actually surprised that it wasn't when it came here. So some states have it, some states don't, but it's weird that it's not kind of standardized because, and I think because it's not a protected title, I think that probably plays a lot into the respect that title garners.
Yeah. That's so interesting. And
yes, that's why we use interior architecture as a title. I still kind of am trying to figure out what to call myself because I'm in between. We both have the same end goal here, is to have both, so we can be double threat or triple threat.
Yeah, we'd like to both be kind of licensed and certified in both professions. So currently I'm a licensed architect. I'm trying to get my interior design certification. Itzel has her interior design certification and is working towards her architecture license. So
yeah, it's just it's a process. So it's cool that you guys, kind of have the opposite journeys, but still ended up
in the same place.
That's very interesting. Okay, well, why don't we just go, since we're kind of already talking about it, let's get into more of the misconceptions. So you kind of started talking about interior decorating versus being interior design, and people kind of tend to assume that it's very superficial.
It's a really misunderstood thing.
And it's actually quite insulting if you call an interior designer a decorator.
Yeah, I would imagine.
So right off the bat, if you do that, you'll get an immediate speech from the designer, this is not the same thing.
Yeah. So when I started off in the interior design program at UT, I remember a story that Nancy Qualick told us. She runs the program. She's been there for ages, and she told us that this was probably in 2006, and she said previously it had been in the College of Communications. Interior design was not in the School of Architecture. It was in the College of Communications. That makes zero sense.
It does.
Whatsoever, because now they're like one and the same almost. Like, I feel like I practice both on a daily basis. How could they not be together as sister practices? But that misunderstanding that the university had is the same misunderstanding that I think my whole family had when I said, yeah, I'm going to college for interior design. And they were like, kind of had the attitude of, why are you going to college for 4 years to learn how to pick out curtains?
I got the same reaction too.
gosh.
Like, really, you're going to spend, this bunch of money on a decorating degree?
My mom, honestly, she was like, but you're so smart. You can do so much. And I was like, Mom, this is a legitimate profession.
And also the other part to that was a lot of vocational schools started offering interior decorating or interior designing as a degree, and these are 2-year programs that are really just kind of driven for people that want a career change. So it's like a quick degree. You want to decorate? Okay, here's your degree. Now you have some qualifications.
Would you equate maybe like the interior decorating associate's degree with like an architectural drafting associate's degree? It's sort of like a taste of the profession, but you're not really fully qualified?
I would say no, because a drafting certificate, even if it's not an associate's, it's very technical. So you really do learn a lot of the fundamental practices that you would use in a professional
Well, they're not the
setting.
same thing.
They're not the same thing, but professionally trained, I think drafting certification is a little more advanced than like a vocational associate's degree.
So, as you guys are talking about this, I'm just wondering, when is it appropriate to use interior decorating versus interior design? Because to me, when I think interior decorating nowadays, I think of like HGTV shows and decorating your single family home.
So interior designers do some decorating, but decorators don't design.
So my personal opinion of it and my experience is interior decorators are individuals that are not professionally trained. They don't work in a professional office setting. They didn't go to school for it. They just have a knack and have a good eye for design and have begun a business and have led to the path of decorating. So they technically cannot call themselves designers.
But they're not
interior designers.
They're not trained in like the technical properties of materials. They're not trained in like fire, life, safety, all of the things that we have to think about on a daily basis when we're shaping spaces.
Yeah,
I think that's the biggest difference.
Like someone who starts a design business, they typically join or partner up with a contractor, and they take on all that scope, all the liability with fire, life, safety, and code compliance, and all those things. But as a professionally trained interior designer working for a firm, you are already practicing these things. We produce documentation. We are in the field enforcing we are in the field enforcing these code compliant requirements, compliance requirements.
Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it did.
I think we need to cut that out.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Interior decorating is for someone who just kind of decided, I'm going to do this.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's for an existing space usually. Like interior designers are often shaping spaces and informing kind of the experience of how a space is built out. Sometimes that space may be existing. It's not always new construction. But I think that decorators are more just kind of coming and applying like a surface level of design to things.
And it kind of goes, the comparison I'm trying to make here is, say, HGTV. It's a fun network to watch because there's a lot of design and exposure. You're seeing things built from anyone that wants to pursue that path, but it's also very unrealistic, not only from a knowledge perspective, but time
and money.
And like the comparison I'm trying to make is like a WebMD. People now think that they can diagnose themselves and go to the doctor and tell them they're wrong.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. You have, consumers or your clients telling you, well, I saw HGTV and you could do this.
Property Brothers and I saw them do this.
And you can do it all in one day. So that's something that's not helping either.
30 minutes, because that's how long the episode was.
Everyone thinks they're a designer now.
Yeah.
And even with Pinterest.
Oh.
That's another one that's become more of an issue because now we're designing through Pinterest. We see an image that we like, and that becomes like our whole inspiration.
Yeah.
And all because of this one image, and we forget about concept and the process.
I went to a panel recently. I was at BD West actually, and they had a bunch of like hotel developers and owners and giants out there, and they kind of each gave us one piece of advice, and one of them said, use less Pinterest. And I think 5 years ago that wouldn't have been, he wouldn't have needed to say that.
Yeah.
But you're right, everyone's using it now, and we all end up pulling the same images that are like the most top searched, and then everything starts to look the same.
Yeah.
Because everyone, this is now going into social media, wants that Instagrammable moment in space.
Right.
So everyone ends up doing the exact same thing and repeating and copying each other.
I talked about this with Alex in his episode, and he was talking about that too, how when he designs, how like it's, I mean, if a brand or a client wants to have that Instagrammable moment, like that's fine, but wouldn't you want to make the whole space be able to create multiple moments rather than just a feature wall?
Yeah,
or
it's
something
interesting.
Like that?
This is like a totally new concept in design. This is not a thing when we were in school, like designing the Instagrammable moment. So exactly right. Like thinking about one frame for a photo is not how we think through design. We think about how you move through a space and experience it, not how you experience it in a still moment.
Yeah. And it's not practical either.
Not always. I mean, it's practical in the sense a lot of clients want it now because this Instagrammable moment, it will be seen online, and that will drive people.
It's
marketing.
Exposure.
It's totally a marketing concept. So I get it for that reason.
Yes.
I get why people want it now. So it is something that we have to think about actively. But yeah, it's a whole new element that we're experiencing now.
So interesting. Funny that you guys say that. I mean, I was in school a lot sooner than you guys were, a lot more recently, and we were already. Funny enough, my major was communications. So when you said that, I was like, I can't imagine.
Can't imagine the interior design.
Because I did journalism. My emphasis was journalism. So like to do journalism and interior design, that's like
night and day almost.
No, that's like not the same at all. So it's funny that you mentioned that, but we were already learning about how to write for social media and stuff like how to write posts for social media in class. Like it's so interesting, and how that's, now that you mention it, like it is even it's seeping into even architecture and design, because like kind of like here at our office outside, if you come to our office in downtown Long Beach, we do have a feature wall right outside, and it's an Instagrammable moment, and a lot of people I have taken a photo of
models out there all the time.
Yeah.
People modeling their friend's handbag collection right outside to get our mural in the background.
Yeah, even the boba place across the street uses our mural as a background, and
that's funny.
So that Instagrammable moment.
Yeah, everything has to be picture perfect now.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Well, okay. Well, so moving forward and moving a little bit past that. So another misconception that we had talked about that I kind of want you guys to dive into a little bit more is, the idea that interior design is an afterthought. It's not. We talked about how people view it as superficial, and then now how a lot of people think, oh, this is something that you can just add on at the end of the process.
Because they're confusing it with interior decorating, I think.
Well, and I think it happens a lot more too in retail, because a lot of times in retail design, we're just focused on the exterior of the building. You don't have tenants yet. So all you can do is design to the exterior aesthetics of it without knowing who is going to go and occupy the space. So from that perspective, that's why it is always an afterthought. And that's when the interior design firm or studio inherits it, and you have to kind of work within those confinements.
Yeah. So architecture is a practice where you're trained to think from the outside in. I know that I was, for sure. And then interior designers are trained to think kind of from the inside out. But the architects get there first.
Yeah.
And so every decision that's made on an envelope of a building will have an impact on the interior. And that's always something that the interior designer or the interior architect has to contend with.
Yeah. And I think for our firm, I think we have a great advantage because we have both in-house, and they should naturally happen concurrently, and we should be collaborating within each other to create the entire experience.
And I think
from
it's
the outside in, from the inside out.
really starting to happen.
Yeah.
And I think it's really cool. So, I mean, I am working currently with the architects, the exterior architects, or the envelope architects of a project, and they're just downstairs.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I've got interior designers sitting next to me that I can learn from. And I think that dynamic it's still new for us. Our department's still young. It's still only a little more than a year old, maybe a year and a half old.
We're going on 2 now.
So we're really kind of just starting to work out the kinks, but that relationship and that working dynamic is like already teaching me so much about both, honestly, about architecture and interior design, and about kind of how to have that holistic approach to design.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really 2 different models merging into one.
Yeah.
And within the last year, we've evolved so much. I think from the architectural side, we were limited as far as materiality and kind of understanding from the inside out. And now that's our process of thinking now. So I think it's a good thing.
I think it's unique in our own office, as you guys said, you know, we are an architecture firm, but now we have an interior studio within that. So on projects where, you know, your team is also working with the architects, it makes the dynamic, I feel like, working on the project a little bit easier, I would imagine, because if you have, you know,
It totally does. It makes things easier, more streamlined.
yeah.
And, you know, quicker communication. If I have a question, I can just Skype message them or just walk downstairs or see them in the kitchen and have a whole conversation about it,
Yeah.
rather than having to like schedule a formal meeting 2 weeks from now and then having a bunch of unanswered questions between now and then. It's really very efficient.
I imagine even design-wise as well.
Well, and the other misconception is that no one has an architectural background, when in reality, the majority of interior designers are architecturally trained. For instance, yourself, you're licensed architect, our principal is a licensed architect, and the rest, like half of our team, has gone to architecture school.
That's true. That's actually a great point. There's so much overlap in the education, which is still, again, why I can't believe interior design was located in the College of Architecture. But I couldn't believe that when I got to school, because there's like literally you take all the same classes for the first year, and then the few years after that, all your classes or half your classes are together, and many of them have the same professor that's teaching your class or then the interior design studio, and they're sister practices, really. It's very difficult to separate them for me. Like I think a lot of people want to draw this hard line between the two, and if I had to kind of, you know, divvy up my tasks daily, is this architecture or is this interior design? That'd be very hard to do. It's kind of become a simultaneous practice for me.
Yeah, and I feel like people that want to pursue this interior architecture path are people that know that you can't have one without the other, and having both makes you a better designer and much better, well-rounded as a professional.
I will say, as someone who, you know, I obviously am not a designer like you guys, but as someone who kind of came into this, you know, knowing with a lot of the misconceptions that we've been talking about with both architecture and interior design, and seeing how our firm here has merged the two, kind of like what you're saying, I view it as very natural now. As someone on the outside looking in, and maybe you could even literally say on the inside looking out, especially because, you know, we're sitting in our office, and when I started, we were still kind of working on doing a lot of promotion of our office, which you guys also designed, and how we also did the interiors and the exterior. And I don't know, like, it just seemed so natural to me. I was like, oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Like, why
works.
would you separate them?
Yeah, interior architecture. Yeah, like that makes sense, you know.
Yeah. So traditionally, they've been two separate things, but the term interior architecture is like starting to become used a lot more. A lot of colleges are offering degrees in interior architecture. So kind of hoping that stays on track and becomes like mainstream nomenclature.
Yeah, even the program that I attended, I think I was the last class where it was called interior design. They changed it to interior architecture.
Okay, so that brings me to my next question. Do you think it's going to interior design is going to become interior architecture, or do you think there's still going to be a distinction or even a need for a distinction?
I think we
That's
probably
kind of a
have
hard
different
question,
views on this. I do not think interior design will go away at all. I think
there's always two sides to everything, right? You're always going to have kind of like the old school frame of mind where interior design is, you know, self-explanatory. Why do we need the need for interior architecture? Because to me that came from not understanding interior design. So there's that way of thinking, and then you have the new way of thinking where you think it's actually a new kind of a specialty that has come from the need for having to change the interior structure of it.
Yeah, so it's there's, you know, these two paths, but then there was born this need for somebody who speaks both languages to help merge them. And I think that's why interior architecture is important, but definitely don't think that makes interior design or architecture any less important. I just think that there's personally this sort of like third path in between that's very necessary for creating a really like well thought out holistic design.
I think it'll help maybe clients select the firms better, because I feel like if you have interior architecture as part of your one of your disciplines, you know that you understand both as a company, versus now you have strictly interior design firms that don't deal with any of the structure or anything like that. You need like the architect or a structural engineer. I think that will kind of be a marketing tool in a way to help firms.
Okay. So, but more or less, they're going to all coexist. That's,
yes.
I mean,
I think
they're
so,
not
for
gonna,
sure.
Interior design is not going to go away.
Okay.
No, and it shouldn't. I'm learning things from the interior designers I work with every day. They have a different expertise than I do. Our expertise overlaps in some ways, but I could not practice interior architecture without the interior designers.
It's been such a great collaborative back and forth between the two types, the two models, because I'm teaching them stuff and they're teaching us stuff on like a daily basis, and they're completely different and related but unrelated at the same time, because we haven't had exposure to it.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were kind of already talking about this, how, you know, a lot of people view it as interiors or architecture, no in between. And we just got finished talking about how, you know, with the creation of interior architecture as another path, it kind of makes it more gray, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a good thing, but it's really hard when people don't understand what that is. I just said this to somebody the other day. I was at a trade show, and he said, "Oh, what do you do at the firm?" I said, "Oh, I'm an interior architect." And he said, "What is that?" It was a trade show or a vendor in the industry, and he never heard of that. He said, "What is that? Does that mean you do interior design and exterior architecture?" I said, "No." That's the first time I've run into that level of kind of really never having heard the term before. I could do interior or exterior architecture, but I choose to focus on the interiors because for me that's like what I relate to most in terms of experiencing a building. That's what I always remember about a space, is how it felt to be in it.
Yeah, for me, I think it's great because it does provide a path, like you said. Before we had our official interiors team here, I always felt I kind of floated around in the gray area. There really was no placement because I had an interest in both. So I didn't belong just to, the exterior portion. I wasn't just interior design too. I kind of wanted to do both, was well-rounded and have had a hand in all these different types of typologies. So naturally, interior architecture kind of does merge the two, and it becomes a comprehensive discipline.
That's the other thing. It's like a necessary thing to merge these two practices, but it also creates a space for those of us who really didn't want to choose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I refuse to choose.
Yeah.
I want to do both. That's always been my personal goal. So the fact that our firm decided to invest in that is extremely
I was practicing strictly architecture for 2 years when I came here. And then as soon as I heard that we were getting an interior design principal and an official department, I raised my hand. I was like, sign me up. I want to be a part of that. I didn't even know the specifics, am I still going to be practicing architecture? I don't know. I figured we'll just figure it out as we go. And it's been really cool to kind of help start a department from scratch, because we've really had the freedom to kind of all establish the roles that we want to be playing. Mm-hmm. And I think for us that's been interior architecture. Yeah.
I've been doing the exact same thing, not the exact same thing, but I've been working on the same type of project since I started here, and we didn't have the official studio. So I've been practicing interior architecture for the last 3 years already without really officially having that as a discipline.
Yeah, I had just started when you transitioned into doing interiors. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of cool to see how fast the team has grown in a year and a half, basically.
I think we've doubled.
Yeah.
We have, 9 people now?
I think 10.
10? Oh my gosh. Yeah, we started out with 4 or 5.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So, we're booming. This is a really growing field for our company.
Yeah.
To be in.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for talking about this with me. This has been great. I've learned a lot, and I don't know, it's really cool to see both of you really kind of take charge and take the lead in doing both. And kind of, I know it sucks to kind of deal with people who still don't really know, but I think our firm's doing a pretty good job at kind of dismantling a lot of these misconceptions that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Chriselle.
you. And that's all we have for this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed listening and learning about some of the different misconceptions between interior design and architecture, and how they are both necessary to make our buildings and spaces work. And I also hope you learned a little bit something in hearing about their stories as also being women in the industry. That wasn't something that we planned on doing. It was just natural that our conversation flowed into that. So I hope you were able to take something from that. The dynamic of the conversation this week has been slightly different than some of the other conversations that I've had in the past. So it was a really nice and refreshing change. But anyway, that's all we have for this week. I hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts so that we can reach more people. And until next week, I will see you soon.